So today we're going to be looking at NYPD shooting incident data, which is a tough topic, but I think it's a good topic. I chose this because I think it really will help you as you are working on your application. What we're looking for is for you to kind of tell a data story and to think sort of like a human about the data you have access to. So to get started, I figured this would be, really a nice one. One thing I'll say, and I think I've said this before if you've ever been around me, is always look at what the data is. So before we take a step into Tableau, one of the nice things about the data that we have here in New York City is this sort of open data platform, and they do things like share a data dictionary, which is just what does each column of data represent, and we get a nice preview of the data. So before I do anything in Tableau, I want to just kind of look through this and have us all kind of get a good idea of what we're going to be looking at in here. And there's some information at the top. Basically, this is sort of data that's been gathered since 2006 of shooting incidents. So both fatal and non-fatal shootings within the New York City metropolitan area. And there's some nice things in here. So there's when the incident occurred, where it occurred. So the borough, there's actually a latitude and longitude. So the exact GPS coordinates, so to speak, of where the incident took place. There's also some information about both the victim and the perpetrator. And although I don't like the name of this, this is actually one of the more interesting data points I think we'll look at throughout the course of working with this data, which is the statistical murder flag, which is whether or not the shooting was fatal and would be counted as a murder. So I think we're going to find some interesting things along the way. I also purposely wanted to not look at the data too much before I got to spend time with you guys so that we could kind of analyze the data as we go along and kind of answer some questions, and you could get a good sense of what that kind of flow of analysis you're able to have in Tableau really looks like. And one of the reasons we use Tableau is because it's a great data exploration tool and it's a great visualization tool. So I'm hoping that I can show you a little bit about how to use Tableau and kind of what it feels like to be a part of the data school and what you're going to be doing on placement, perhaps. Okay. So I think we have a good sense of what the data is. Each row of data, it says in here, is a particular incident. So we've got some demographic information about the victim and the perpetrator. There's some dates, there's some times, and there's some geography. That's actually a pretty good concept for a data set if you're thinking about applying. Trending data and using time series is a really easy way to do visualization. So I'm sure we'll probably do that as we build out the dashboards and the visualizations today. Okay, and I will also, I think I put it in there already, so you should have the data dictionary. If you are linking directly from here, there's just an export button. If you're using Tableau Public, you'll want to download it as a CSV or a CSV for Excel. Either of those should work fine. If you are using Tableau Desktop Professional, you've got more options, but like I said, we've already got it curated for you, and I'm hoping that you've already downloaded it, or with my slight monologue, you'll be downloading it right now so that we can get started in Tableau. I like to keep this kind of around. I'll put it off to my second screen to the side in case we need to refer back to it along the way. It's always a good idea to know exactly what data represents, and that's why I like to keep this kind of relevant and prominent throughout the course of actually doing the visualizations. Okay, so I'm actually going to close this and we'll just start from the beginning. So I'm in my desktop. I'm going to double click on Tableau. If you have Tableau Public, no problem. It's going to look very similar. When I work in Tableau Desktop and when I teach new people about Tableau Desktop, I like to start at the very beginning because this is what's going to happen every single time you open it. So you have 3 sections here. Once you open Tableau, I'm going to start in the middle. So in the middle is going to be recent things that you've worked on. So you can see I've been working on a calendar visualization for our team. I built a box plot and a histogram recently, and I looked at Andy's great workbook of table calculations, LODs, and so on. Anything you're working on, this is just sort of like your recents. You can also pin things here if you always want them to be there in the future. And then at the bottom, You have sample workbooks. So these come pre-built into the application. So if you're ever just looking at how things are built, like you see this map and you're like, that's really cool, you can always open these workbooks. These are samples that Tableau makes, and they just come bundled with the application. On the right, we've got the Discover section, which is sort of like, eye candy and ways to learn more. So it's kind of broken down into two sections. One is sort of training or like resource videos or just videos. And Tableau actually does a really good job of the basics of getting you started like this. So I highly encourage you to actually look through some of those links if you're curious and you want to learn a little bit more on how everything functions. And then there's also general resources. So these are a little bit more broad, most likely blog posts, that type of thing that you'll see as well. But that's not really the fun part. The more fun part is actually connecting to your data. Again, most of you are probably using Tableau Public, so you might not have as many options as me, and I'll even click them more so you can see that full list. When you have a Tableau Desktop license or a professional license, you get access to connect to all of these data sources and databases and then some. So you can see there's this additional connectors. I've got 77 installed. The ones I most prominently connect to tend to come to the top of this list here. So I've been doing some recent analysis in Google Sheets. That's actually what that calendar was built off of. So those will change over time. But there's some basic ways to connect as well, which is what we're going to do. We're going to connect to a file. There are also saved data sources. These are just for you. The sample superstore is the sample data set that Tableau also installs with Tableau Desktop. So if you're ever out in the world in the Tableau forums or looking for more, you'll see a lot of sample superstore out there. I'm pretty sure it's based off of Office supply data, and more particularly, I think it's Staples data. They keep it updated and current, but it's a really nice sort of data set that has a lot of the elements I'm describing. It has dates, it has geography in it, it has some really nice categorical information in it as well. So if you are ever looking for inspiration or ways to kind of up your Tableau skill, usually working with the Superstore data set is a good way to do that. But again, like I said, for the sake of the training, we're going to just connect to that shootings data. So I'm going to click on a text file, and I'm actually going to go to my downloads because that's where it is. And I'm going to go ahead and open the file. Tableau does a lot of things automatically. In particular, if you are connecting to an Excel or CSV and you have, let's say, just one sheet, Tableau will automatically see that, hey, you've got a sheet or what it kind of considers a table of data, and will naturally bring that into this section. So this is called sort of like the data source screen, for lack of better terminology. And we can see that it's already brought in from our file the one table, which is the data that we have. This matches very similarly or is identical to the data dictionary preview that we saw. So these are all of those individual rows and how Tableau is reading them in. One thing I like to do before I dive into my visualizations and get started is to kind of look through this a little bit more deeply. So on the left, and especially if you don't have the benefit of a data dictionary, it can be nice to just orient yourself in the data. So you see on the left, we've got all of those column names again. To the left of that are the different data type icons associated with them, which Tableau is sort of doing its best guess as to what they are supposed to be, but we can always modify that. And then on the right, you're seeing a preview of that information. So just kind of looking across, we've got that occurrence date or that occur date, which is seeing as a date. That's that calendar icon. We've got this field, which we'll look at a little bit further. This is the occur time. I'm guessing in the underlying data, there's just only a timestamp and there's not a date. So they're all sort of defaulted to that first date in 1899, but that's okay. We'll work on fixing that and still be able to use that time in our analysis if it makes sense. We've got the borough, we've got the precinct and the jurisdiction, which relate to the NYPD. This is that flag I told you about, the statistical murder flag, as to whether it was really a fatal or non-fatal shooting. And then some of that demographic information. I also like pointing out at this moment that Tableau at its heart is a data reader. So if you have a background in doing any sort of analysis, or if you've ever done anything on your own, usually you end up, maybe building some pivot tables in Excel, or maybe hand keying or cleaning up some data. A Tableau is completely different in that you point it toward your data set, and then everything you do is sort of on top of it, but you're not disturbing the data. That makes for a really nice process, because now that data just kind of sits, it can be as it is, and you can kind of work on it all on your own. And it's also kind of an important concept to think about, especially if you guys are doing your application. You're like, I wish this were different. I'm going to challenge you guys to not go and fix your underlying data, to use Tableau to make some of those adjustments. Never have I ever seen a clean and perfect data set. This one's actually pretty good on purpose for the sake of our training. But in the real world, it's very likely that there will need to be some little minor changes and cleanups that happen as you are analyzing the data. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much more time here. That's all you really need to know for the sake of getting started. Basically, we connected to data. We saw a preview of the data. We got a good sense of what some of the fields were. At this point, I like to just sort of dive in and begin my analysis. The first thing I'm going to do, which you don't have to do, but just to make it a little bit easier for you guys, is I'm going to bump up the font a little bit. I'm just going to change the entire formatting of the workbook, and I'm going to just make the fonts all a little bit larger so that you can see them. And I'm going to make my tooltips a little bit larger too. Again, this is not necessary for you watching me. This is purely for the benefit of the recording and for your eyes. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to see as we go along. So let's go ahead and get started. I think the very obvious thing to do here would be to start looking at the occurrence time and get a time series going to just get some more information about the data and understand what we actually have. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to double click on occur date. I'm going to go ahead and set this to entire view. One of the things I really like about Tableau, and one of the things that you'll see, is it's really friendly with dates. So I haven't done anything too awesome. I've just put the year on there. So now I can confidently tell you that the data runs from 2006 up through 2020. I'm going to go ahead and use this field that's the NYPD shooting incident data historic count. Basically, this is just the number of rows of data in the data set. So it's fair to say that we had 2,055 shooting incidences in 2006. And then you can kind of see a very interesting trend as we go along. It looks like it's been on the decline up through 2017, 2018, and 2019. And then we have a spike in 2020. So there might be something interesting there that we want to look at along the way. Let me make that just a little bit skinnier. One of the nice things about Tableau, and you can do this if you're following along with me, is it's really easy to drill into dates. So on the axis down here at the bottom, if I click this, you'll start seeing that it's going to drill to more granular time. If I can direct your eyes up to the top on the column shelf, you can see now I have a field. This is also called a pill for both our years and our quarters. And I can drill even further, either from down here or from up here. So I'm going to go ahead and drill in one more to the month. This is a terrible visualization, but this gives you some sense of the power of Tableau and what you can do with your data. So as an example, I might want to take quarter off, and you can do this with me to get a bigger sense of maybe a time series here of what's going on. So it's clear that there is some sort of obvious trend that's kind of happening over and over again. Look, this is August, this is July. Here's July again, July, August. I'm already having this sense that maybe the shooting incidents in July could be related to Independence Day, perhaps. There's June, so there's clearly some spikes in the summer. And we can also do something like switch it up. So now we're looking at how is it trending year over year by month. And I'm doing all of this with simple drag and drop. Before I go too much further, I think it's important, and I probably kind of jumped a step by not mentioning the data pane over on the left side. So what we had in the beginning was the data source and these various fields or columns of data. And what Tableau does after it reads them in is it makes its best guess as to whether something is a dimension or a measure. So this horizontal line you're seeing here, this visual break, is sort of the delineation between those two. So a dimension is something that builds a header, so you can see our dates or dimensions. You know, we can slice and dice our data by dimensions. Those are mostly what we would use for filters as an example. And then we have things like our measures. So I just went in and I dragged on this measure. If I drag it on again, you'll notice that it automatically is doing an aggregation. So measures are things that you would aggregate, meaning you would either sum them, you would take an average. In this case, we're counting. You can specify and customize that aggregation further, but that's the way Tableau kind of breaks it up. Now, it's worth saying that, again, Tableau is a data reader, so you can move things around as appropriate. It's actually done a really good job. I'm kind of surprised. So this incident key is a good example. This is what we would call a primary key, or sort of like the unique identifier or unique ID associated with that incident. And Tableau is smart enough to say, oh, it says key. It's probably a dimension. It's probably that unique identifier. Sometimes I've seen it where it's down below, and actually I have found one. This precinct, this is not a measure. This is nothing that we would want to aggregate. We saw that in the preview of our data. The precinct is just a number. So what we can do is we can drag precinct up from measures to dimensions. And you'll notice as well, there's another concept that's a little bit more nuanced, which is whether something is continuous or discrete. So if you're familiar with math at all and the difference or distinction, discrete are just finite things. Think of discrete as a list of things. There's only X number of options. They're known, right? So there's only 12 months in a year. That's a discrete list. Something continuous is something sort of unbreakable. Think of it going from negative infinity to positive infinity, or in the sake of time, it could go from the beginning of time to the end of time. The key there is it's an unbroken axis, and we'll explore that a little bit more along the way. But for now, we've kind of got, the start of a visualization. I'm going to swap this back. We've got a good sense of what's going on, and my eye is now drawn to July 2020, where there were a lot of incidents of shootings reported. I'm going to drag here onto color so we can more clearly compare those various years. This might be a little bit distracting visually. There's a lot of colors going on. My peers might be calling this a spaghetti chart right now, but it's at least good as we are analyzing to understand what's going on, and to also see that there is definitely some seasonality and some common trends happening. So February, which is where we are now, seems like it's in general a low month in terms of frequency. And then we talked about it, or I did at least, that sort of upward spike in the summer, particularly around July. And then we can kind of see how it goes out. This might be interesting. Look, September 2011. So we can kind of look through this a little bit further. But very quickly, with just a few clicks, we've gone and we've now started to analyze the data a bit further to start adding context. I'm going to leave this one for now, and let's start looking at, I think, some of the geographic elements so that we can get a little bit more information. So if you're tracking with me, it's like we kind of started, we wanted to see how many shootings there were by year, and now we've kind of broken it down a little bit more by year and month. It would be nice for us to give this a name, so we're going to call this number of shootings by month and year. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to rename this if I can, or actually I'll make a new one. So I'm going to create a calculated field that's just going to be the number of incidences. Because when we're thinking about data visualization, first, if you haven't already been tilting your head, you can with me now. This axis is very hard to read. The count of the NYPD shooting incident data historic.csv. I don't even know what that's talking about. So instead, what we'll do is we'll create a calculated field, and let's call it something human. So the number of incidences, because what we're going to be doing is just aggregating up. I'm just going to build a dummy calculation, and you build one with me. That's just one. So all I'm doing is making a new column of data that's got a 1 in it for every single row. So when I sum that up, that should be equivalent to that count. And let me actually swap that out so we can see what it looks like. The data didn't change, the shape of the chart didn't change. That makes total sense. That's to be expected. But now we can at least read it a little bit more clearly in terms of the number of incidences and what they are by year and by month. Okay.
Hi, Anne. Just a
Hello.
quick question for you from Eric. I think, so he said, does it make a difference if the data type is a number? then converts into a dimension versus being a string and converts into a dimension? I think that's what it's.
Yeah, it's probably it doesn't necessarily make a difference. How would I say this? It's very unlikely that you will have a string come in as a measure directly. It is the case that you may have a calculated field that shows up beneath this horizontal line that kind of acts like a measure in that sense. And that's because it would be aggregated as it occurred. But it doesn't necessarily matter, so to speak, if you take something that is potentially a number and you turn it into a dimension if it is a measure, or vice versa. I hope that helps answer your question, Eric.
I'll confirm and make sure. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got our shootings by month and year. Let's go ahead and do another one. Let's now look at where in New York. So we have a sense of how much. Let's start looking into the where. Now my eyes are drawn to, and I know this data set a little bit, so we can use the latitude and longitude. One of the other nice things about Tableau is that it's really easy to make maps. And in particular, it can use geographic data. There are some presets that are built in. So things like country, state, cities over populations of about 20,000, I think it is, and zip codes will all come through automatically, or postal codes. Those will all show up and Tableau will know how to map those. It also knows how to do exact geographic points, or latitudes and longitudes in our case. So that's actually what we're going to use as we build this visualization. So I'm going to double click on latitude and double click on longitude. You'll see two things. One, when I did this, Tableau first built a bar chart because I only had this latitude. You'll see it's an average. That's fine. We're going to disaggregate this data so we can actually see all the dots, all the different incidences. But notice whenever I added the longitude, it immediately changed the visualization type to a map. And if we're looking pretty closely, that's definitely right around New York City. That's where I'm sitting potentially. I might be a little bit, no, that might be exactly kind of where our office is if we were kind of averaging together the latitudes and longitudes. But it is worth saying we only have one data point right now because it's taking all of those latitudes and longitudes and averaging them together. So what we need to do is sort of separate out our data by something else that's in there. So I'm going to take the incident key because that's that unique record we talked about, that unique key that's associated with those incidences or those shootings. And now you'll see instead of having one dot, I have 18,564 marks. Each data point or visualization element is called a mark in Tableau. And if I hover over these, you'll see that they have their individual latitude and longitude and their incidence key as well. So this is a good start. We're getting a sense already of where these incidences took place. It looks like there's a lot of density around these different areas. It's not super clear to date exactly where the high frequency is because there's some overlap. So I think we should kind of work on that now to see if we can't make this map a little bit more clear. One thing I'm going to do to start with is I'm actually going to go up to map here and I'm going to go to map layers. In Tableau, you can specify the type of map background style that you want. I'm going to switch it to streets just so that we have a little bit more context as to where we are. This also helps me out because I haven't been living in New York for very long. So I was pretty sure that this was Staten Island, but it definitely makes me feel a little bit better seeing a label associated with that. We can turn off some of this. There's kind of a bit of noise here. So let's turn off the water labels. I don't think we need those. The state and province names we don't need. We probably don't even need the borders. We definitely don't need the countries. Let's see what it looks like without. I think I might leave the streets. Let's see what we get without the terrain. That's not doing a whole lot. It's kind of making a little bit of change there, so we can leave that on. I'm going to untick the points of interest. You can see like the Newark airport and then JFK kind of go away. I think that's fair to turn those off. And let's see what we can do with the neighborhoods. I don't know that I'm seeing, I'm seeing them. I do want to keep them because there's Queens. I can see that coming and going. But this is a little bit more clear. Certainly, I think if you're in the area with me, this makes a bit more sense as to where exactly these occurred. Okay, So while we're here, let's start playing around with what this map looks like a little bit further. One of the nice things about Tableau is you build all of these visualizations using sort of three aspects: the column shelf, the row shelf, and what's called the marks card. On the marks card are two things. One, there's a drop down that specifies the type of mark you want to use. So right now we've got a circle with this sort of automatic fill, and it's kind of set that way, but we can set it to something else. I've set it to a map type. There's still circles because they're geographic points, but if we had something like a city or like a zip code, we could have it fill sort of like that shape of that different data point. But we've got lots of options. Let me switch it over to density instead. So what density does is it sort of aggregates the data together, and this gives us a better sense of where the high frequency is. So now anywhere you're seeing that darker blue, that's where there's a higher frequency, a higher occurrence of those incidences or incidences. Let's go in and adjust the color. I think it's a bit hard to read because we've got this beautiful blue water and then we've got this blue color palette. So things are kind of being washed out. So let's go in and play around a bit on what we might want to use. Let me actually bring up my chat so I can see what you guys want to do. So let me go ahead and set the color. And I don't want to go red. I don't want to be overly dramatic with what it is. So let's see if we can't find something that has better color that isn't so intense in terms of the concept. So the density gold dark still a bit much. Let's see if we've got, let's see if the orange looks okay. Okay, I think I'm actually probably okay with the orange. It's probably a little bit better. I mean, this isn't necessarily fair to go from green to yellow to red in the context of what we're doing. So I think I'm going to keep it on this density orange light. And then I'm going to do one more thing, and you guys can do it as well, is I'm going to set the washout of the map a little bit up so it's just not so intense. So maybe we'll put it at like maybe 10%, just so we can see it a bit further. So I hope this is a little bit more clear. I think as we're looking through it and we can zoom in on the map, we get a sense of where some of this is happening. So I know that this is sort of the Brooklyn area down here, and then we've got sort of the upper part of Manhattan here. We're getting up into the Bronx. That looks like that's where a lot of the heavy frequency is throughout this. And you'll notice when we build maps, you can zoom in, you can move around. So this toolbar kind of lets you do all those things. So I can drag the map, do different things. I keep clicking on this push pin because that will recenter the map to your data. That's one of the nice things Tableau does, is it will zoom the map to the extent of your data so that you can really see what is actually happening. So now, go ahead, Nathan.
Just before, yeah, we've got another quick question about what does the detail mark do on the marks card? Obviously, you're just taking us through the color mark.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're about to go on to all of these things, but I'll just keep throwing them your way as they come in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so the detail shelf, as it's called, lets you basically add more data information to the visualization. In this case, Eric, the reason I've added it is to disaggregate the data so that we have a dot for each individual incident. When it's on detail, that means it's only part of basically how the data is being pulled into the view or the viz, but it's not actually used as a mark or anything else. The good key to see here is that it's also in the tooltip as well. So maybe a good example I could do is if I put borough on there. So if I drop it on detail here, or if I just drop it directly onto the marks card, that's the same concept in Tableau's world. And that's that detail icon. I could put this maybe on label if I wanted to, potentially, if we can see them at all. They're probably too small to see. But that's what it's going to do, Eric, because it's going to, in this case, disaggregate our data to each of the individual incidences. So you would use the detail shelf anytime you wanted that information to be part of your visualization. Similarly, I can walk through the other shelves. They change depending on your mark type. So I know I kind of breezed through it, but we have the color shelf, and these will look a little bit different depending on the mark type. So because we have a density mark type, we can see the color palettes that we can choose from. We can adjust the opacity, which is the inverse of transparency. So the more opaque it is, the less transparent it is. It might actually be nice for us to do that a little bit. We can adjust the intensity of that as well. It might actually be a little bit better for us to kind of increase that intensity and drop the opacity. That way we can see some of the labels coming through from some of the burrows. The border does exactly what you would think it would do, is it draws a border around them. It's not necessarily going to do it when we're in density mode. And then halo does something similar, just kind of adds a glow behind each of those individual dots. Okay, so I'm going to rename this. Let's call this "Where Are These Taking Place?" So now we have a good sense of the frequency. So there's kind of two things unfolding. It looks like Brooklyn and the Bronx, this sort of area, are both kind of hotspots in terms of where these shooting incidences are taking place. So I think we've got a little bit more context, and we can start using this to even go a bit further. I'm going to pop into another worksheet so we can make yet another one. And this time I want to focus on the who. So who is the victim? We'll do that to start. So who's the vic? So let's bring on the victim's sex first. It looks like we've got 3 values: female, male, and maybe unknown or undefined, or probably just unknown. And now we can drag the number of incidences onto our column shelf. And let me just fit this to the entire view. This is great because we now know the victims are very heavily distributed towards males. It looks like 21,000 of these incidences from 2006 to 2020, men were the victim, and only 2,200 were women. It looks like, look, this is actually good data because there's only 11 that are undefined or unknown. That's pretty good when you think about the data, which means they must have categorized this pretty accurately along the way. This bar chart's not that great, but there are some things we can do to make it a little bit easier for our audience. So down here on the axis or up on the toolbar at the top, we can sort our data in descending order. I find when I make bar charts, that's always what I like to do, is I like to sort them in a contextual way such that our end user is going to see the most important thing first. If we go back, and it's worth saying that Tableau has sort of infinite undo, as long as you're within your workbook and you don't save and close it. Well, you can save it, but don't close it. It's basically undo during your entire, viz session, so to speak. But you can always kind of undo and go back forward. So that becomes a really handy tool. But my point being that while Tableau is smart, it's up to you to actually be a little bit more smart and thoughtful with how you would look at the data. Tableau has just put these in alphabetical order. So my preference would be, let's go ahead and sort that in descending order so it tells a better story. Now, there's a couple other things we can kind of do. One is I'm going to right click and I'm just going to hide this field label for rows. That's a kind of a redundant naming convention, and we're going to focus on making these a little bit more clear. So right now we just have a M and an F and a U, and that's kind of hard to read. So it might be easier for us to actually right click and edit the alias. So I'm going to call this males. I'm going to right click, call this females. And let's just go ahead and set this to unknown. Now, the reason I'm doing this and how we're doing this in Tableau, and again, remember, this is a data reader. It's still those 3 first letters in our underlying data. I can right click and just alias them. So this tells Tableau, hey, every time you see the M in the victim sex field, let's go ahead and call that males. That becomes much easier to read, especially when you look at the tooltip. We can now see that there's 21,370 incidences for males as opposed to that M, and then someone kind of having to do that mental leap to say that they are a male. And just so that you guys see it, if you were to right click and go to aliases here, you're going to see where they're set. So one of the things I like about Tableau is there's at least 3 different ways to do these things. Right click is what I say will get you there 90% of the time. So I right clicked and edited the alias in the bar chart, but we can also right click on the field and set up the alias. So this is sort of like a little table that was built kind of on the fly, and you can see what the alias is for each one. So now I've sort of renamed each of those individual values. Okay, so we've got males, females. Let's start disaggregating this. Let's look a little bit more because we have an age group in there and we've got a race. So I'm going to drag out age group as a secondary to see what we've got. Okay, and this I actually don't mind how Tableau sorted it. I might actually go a little bit further and do one more thing, which is drag this 18 or less than 18. Oops, didn't like when I did that. I might manually sort it instead. Such that we've got that less than 18 at the very top. Typically, you would be able to drag that up and change it. I've had this bug on my Tableau for a while whenever I try to do this sort of ad hoc sorting. So instead, I'm just going to ask you to right click, sort, and then you can manually sort it. So this way it shows up in that list. And the point I'm trying to reach at is I want this to be sort of in chronological order by age. And I think it makes sense, you know, anytime you're probably seeing some sort of chart around age, it's most likely you're going to see youngest on the left and it go up to the right. The unknowns, it's kind of tricky. I don't know if we want to keep them or if we want to remove them. For now, I think we're probably okay to just kind of leave them there for a bit, but maybe we'll end up filtering them out. But already we've got a lot more information about the distribution of the victims once we put age in there. So we took that big bucket of 21,000 males and we've kind of separated it into those groups. So yes, it kind of tends towards younger, you know, 44 and less, but this is kind of surprising that this is not, maybe not surprising, but interesting that about half of them are in that 25 to 44 range. And then, you know, you can see another big chunk are in 18 to 24 category. Let's do one more thing because I think this will actually be nice. We're going to build what's called a quick table calculation. And what I want to do is instead of just having the raw counts for these number of incidences, instead I want to see sort of like the part to whole or the proportion or the percent of total. So I'm going to right click on my sum number of incidences and I'm going to go to quick table calculation. Now, a quick table calculation is best described as sort of doing a calculation on the data that's inside of your viz. It only works inside of just your single viz. It's just kind of like an ad hoc thing that you do. I really like table calculations. If you look at anything that I do on Tableau Public, a lot of people will say that I'm the queen of table calculations. I just like them because they're fun and friendly to work with, and you can do a lot of sort of like analytical things with them. But for the sake of this, it's just important to know that there's quick table calculations. These are the different ones that they have, and we can use them to get to what I'm looking for, which is the percent of total. So I'm going to go, and again, I'll do this again. I'm going to right click, quick table calculation, and let's do percent of total. Now, one thing that's interesting, you might have saw this, is the only thing that changed, like the width of the bars, the length of the bars did not change. Only the axis changed to the percent of total number of incidences. And if I were to add these up, and I can highlight all of these. So let me see if I can draw a highlight box over all of that. And then I'm going to have you kind of look down at the bottom left. I'm sure this is kind of small, but you can see that adds up to 100%. What Tableau has done is taken those numbers. So now I can see of the total victim population, 40% of them were males that were between 25 and 44. Now we can specify that a little bit further. I'm actually a little bit more interested in what that distribution is among the genders and not necessarily both the gender and the age. So what we can do is I'm going to right click, I'm going to compute using, and instead of table down, which if you're thinking about what that means, it's the entire visualization. It goes from top to bottom. I'm going to switch it to pane down. Now, what that does is, let me go back one step. If you see that horizontal line, that break, that border between males and females, each of these is a pane. So now I've told Tableau, instead of specifying table down as it is right now, and I'll go in and adjust this, we're going to compute using pane down. We now see that it's going to be the percent of total for each of the different genders. And I can always double check this. We can highlight and select all of our data, and you're going to see it sum up there. So our 6 different age ranges, or yeah, I guess it's 6 different age ranges total up to 100%. So now this is interesting. I can say that 44% of male victims were between 25 and 44 years of age. And we can compare that, right, to the 37% of females that were between 25 and 44. So this is nice for sort of a comparison. And I think my eyes are immediately drawn to 2 things, which is it looks like younger females and older females have been reported as victims more than they have with males. And with the unknown, at this point, it might be appropriate for us to just completely take them out of our analysis because there's not that many data points. We had 11 and now we're kind of separating it out a bit further. So what I want you to do is I want you to click on that unknown and I want you to click this exclude button. Now, when you do that, and I'll go back and I'll just go forward again, you're going to see that show up on the filter shelf. So this is yet another shelf. The filter shelf is a way to filter your data. And I'm going to right click on this as always and edit the filter so you can see exactly what's going on. So you can see that it has excluded, Tableau has excluded unknown from my analysis. So now on this chart, we've got just the males and the females and those different age groups, but we've completely eliminated the unknown gender from our data set for the victims. Now, what's interesting about this as well, and kind of to talk a little bit more about Tableau filters, is this is just on this individual viz. So if we go back to our map, this still has, and I can show you by dragging on the victim sex here, we've still got those 3 genders. We've still got unknown and the little bits of data. I don't even think I can see the data points. Oh, there they are. The little bits of data there. So it's important when you're doing your visualizations to think about where the data is filtered and what you want to be filtered. Because the unknown data points aren't very relevant for the analysis, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to apply this filter to our entire workbook or the entire data source. So if you right click, we're going to select apply to worksheets, and let's go ahead and set it to all using this data source. And what that's going to ensure us, and when we go back to this, this will be slightly different, is that we don't have any of those unknown genders for our victim within the data set. And if you're asking me why I made that decision, this is in context with the analysis. If we were looking purely at frequency and we didn't care about demographics, fine, we could keep it. But because I'm sort of making demographics a part of the conversation, a part of the analysis that we're doing, I think it makes sense for us to kind of drop it for now. Okay. So we got a little bit more sense of who the victim is. I'm even going to add the labels on here so we can see this. And I'm going to go ahead and pretty these up because we might not be coming back. I'm going to right click and I'm going to format this. And I'm going to go ahead and set the default property for that percentage just so that it has a few less decimals. It's really hard for someone to read 4 numbers and then retain them throughout. And I don't know that it makes a whole bunch of difference whether it was 10.11 or 10%. I think realistically, we would just say it's about, it's 10%. It's about 10%. So now we've got a good sense of distribution. I might do something additional, which is I'm going to hold down my control key, which is going to make a copy of that field. And let's drag that onto color as well. This gives just some visual separation or color encoding for that gender. So now we can kind of more clearly say we're comparing 2 different things. Not a huge fan of the color choices. So let's go in and make some adjustments. Let's maybe choose something a little bit brighter. So let's make females purple, which is my favorite color. And let's make males orange. There we go. So now we've got this kind of nice set of bar charts where we've got the percent of total. And I might even change this to call this something like the distribution, or maybe, distribution of victim profiles, so that we have some sort of sense of what it is that we're looking at. And this, I think, is a great chart because anyone can kind of use this. I'm going to do one more thing, which is I'm going to right click and I'm going to format this label. I'm not going to get too in the weeds on formatting. You can very easily get in the weeds on formatting, but I just want to make this a little bit bigger, especially when we have sort of almost hierarchical data. I think it kind of makes sense to make the outer labels a bit more prominent so that people know, okay, we're reading males, and then here's kind of like the subsets within them. Okay, so let's kind of track back, and this might be the time where we start building a dashboard. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save my workbook. Tableau has an autosave feature. The last time I did a training, my Tableau crashed at the very end. So this is going to be a good time for us to actually pause and save our workbook. So let's call this Tableau training 2/16/2022. You can call it whatever you want to call it. So now if anything happens, I can actually just go in and open my workbook as opposed to potentially starting from scratch. It has auto recovery, but we might as well save it. Never do I ever like it when someone has just a book one set of visualizations. I'm always like, can you just save your file and give it a name? So please do that, especially if you're submitting your application. Okay, so we've saved. I feel a little bit better now. Let's start building out a dashboard. So right now we've just been building out visualizations. We've got 3 going. And I think I said to you, a dashboard is a collection of visualizations. So down here in the bottom, we've got 3 icons. This one on the left is a worksheet or a sheet. And anytime you make a new chart, you're going to build from a sheet. I'll delete that for now. But then there are dashboards and stories. We'll be building a dashboard. I actually don't use stories very much. The best way to describe a story is sort of like a way to do slides inside of Tableau. But most people end up just using dashboards, which are a collection of visualizations or worksheets. So I've just clicked on the create a new dashboard button. I've got dashboard 1 here. As we get started, you'll notice this is a different canvas layout than what we've got within our worksheets. In particular, on the left, we no longer have our data pane. Instead, we have the individual worksheets or visualizations that we've been building along the way. We've got this white space that says to drop sheets here. So this is the actual size of the dashboard. I'm going to make this very, very big so that we can all see it. I know in the past someone had asked, what is a good dashboard size to share out for the sake of your application? And that's a really great question. So you definitely want to avoid the horizontal scroll, so the left to right scroll. People are going to be annoyed, and I'm sure you're always annoyed when you're on a website and you have to scroll left to right to read something. So you never want it to be wider than a common computer screen. So I would maybe take the width one more, set of 100 up, the 1500, but that's kind of a stretch. I'd probably keep it around 13 to 1500 for width. Now, height is a little bit different. You have options there because you could make something sort of longer and you could scroll through it and you could kind of lay it out like a newspaper article, right? People are kind of comfortable with kind of blocking these sections and reading downward. So you've got more flexibility there, but just to keep it easy and so that you guys can all see it, I'm just going to make this 1,000 pixels high. So I haven't done anything too dramatic. I've just adjusted the size of the canvas so that that's where we're going to drop all of our visualizations. Now, one thing Tableau does, and I'm in the habit of getting rid of, is it default generates layouts for different device types, in particular mobile phones. We're not going to build a mobile dashboard. So what I like to do is actually just delete this phone layout for now. So that means, and you'll want to do this probably for your application as well, just keep it in desktop only mode or delete any other layouts. So you've got just one design for your dashboard. That's going to make it easy for us to see. I also encourage you when you're building your application to send the link that you're going to make for your dashboard on Tableau Public to your friends and family. Send it to the least savvy tech person and ask them to go look at it on a computer and see if they can actually read what it is you're building. It happens quite often for newer people working in Tableau that they don't really think about the size, and then they go and they're like, did you love my beautiful dashboard? Wasn't it so cool? And they're like, I couldn't read it. It didn't show up properly on my browser. So make sure you're kind of thoughtful about the layout. Okay, so I've given you a rough overview of building a dashboard. Now let's actually do some stuff. So I'm going to drop the map on because I think that's an easy win. So when you drop visualizations on, and I'm going to drop that on, and I'm going to drop on our distribution of victim profiles, you'll see that Tableau just kind of lets you lay them out however you want. So I could put this to the left. You can see that sort of gray shading that's happening. You can put it to the top or the bottom. This might actually look better being on the bottom as opposed to that sort of left to right, based on the geography and the layout of New York. You can customize this stuff a lot further, and we'll start playing around with that as I have about maybe 23-ish or so minutes to kind of build out a dashboard. But we can delete some of this extra stuff. So the color legends automatically come on. I'm going to kind of just delete this and get rid of it for now because we don't really need it. Maybe we'll need it further on, but I don't really like using color legends very much in the sake of my analysis. And yeah, Eric, I'm seeing what you're saying in chat. Yeah, 1920 by 1080 is probably the best layout or resolution of a screen you should be designing for. Most laptops, although they might have a higher resolution, most people will dial down the resolution so they can actually read the text. So yes, I would plan on building for a 1920 by 1080. Okay, so let's rename this. I don't have a good name for it now, but I don't like naming it dashboard 1. So let's just call it NYC shooting incidences for now. And let's start actually going a little bit more rapidly through some of this data. I was actually kind of interested in, so we have the time, but we have the year and the months, but let's actually take advantage of Tableau using time a bit further and see if we can't actually come up with something a little bit more interesting. Before I go too far, let's preview the data one more time because I think we've got time down to the, oh, it looks like it's down to the minute, so it's not too terrible. But let's go ahead and bucket that maybe by the hour. So what I'm thinking of is, okay, we have a good sense of, frequency over time. We have a good sense of who the victims were. We have a good sense of where this is happening, but maybe more of like when this is happening is something we could look into. So when do these take place? And it's always a good idea when you're doing analysis, especially in the very beginning with Tableau, to start with a question. That's a very common thing. So if you can kind of ground yourself in what am I trying to explain, then you can work toward a visualization that's going to answer this question. So now that I've posed that, when do these shootings take place? Let's see what we can find out. So I'm going to right click on, well, actually I'm going to right click drag on the occur time, and I'm going to drop it on rows. Now, again, particularly here, a right click is probably going to be your best friend. When I drop it, you'll see I have this sort of drop field menu, and I have a whole bunch of options. And I have some blue options and some green options. I won't get too in the weeds, but it's important to know that the blue ones are going to kind of generate headers here, and the blue ones are going to be what's called date parts. So if you imagine that a date has different components. So today is 2/16/2022, February 16th, 2022. The date part of the day would just be the 16th. It would just be a 16. Tableau would get rid of the 2, get rid of the 2022, and just have a 16. In the same way, if I'm going to pick on hour, minute, or second, it's just going to pick an hour between 0 and 23, I think, or 12 and 11, 12 a.m. and 11 p.m. Versus if we look at some of these green ones down here, it's actually going to kind of truncate or roll it to, I like to say truncate it to that specific component. So I'm going to set this to the hour so that I hope what we have is we've got every hour of the day starting at 12 a.m. up through 11 p.m. And then I'm going to do the same thing because if you remember, this is just time. So we're going to use our occur date, and we're going to right click drag, and let's bring out the day of the week or the weekday. So in a very similar fashion, we're looking at, Monday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with Sunday typically being the first start of it. And now let's bring our number of incidences. Let's first bring it onto text. And so we just have like a nice basic text table. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm going to challenge you. Which combination of hours and days of the week have the highest frequency? It's very hard to tell. I think my eyes are kind of glossed over. This is the largest number I've seen. Oh, nope, there's a larger one here. But let's go ahead and then hold down our control key and drag this onto color as well. And let's change our mark type to a square. Okay, so I was right to some degree that these were where the bigger numbers were. My eyes were able to see them a little bit more clearly, but I think when we've added blue here, we can much more easily distinguish where some of that frequency is. And so it looks like a lot of the highest occurrences, so to speak, are in the early morning hours on the weekends. I'm going to right click on our hour. I'm not going to get too in the weeds on formatting. This is more of a reminder for me than you. And I'm just going to change this to 12 hour, just so we can all read it a little bit more clearly. I don't really like 0 a.m. or 0 o'clock. So let's go ahead and just set it to like 12. And I'm going to right justify this just so that it looks a little bit better. And then let's actually go in and adjust the color here so that we make it kind of match that theme we had going with the density. This is really bright on my screen, so I'm going to kind of dim this out a little bit. But the purpose of this, and this is called either a highlight table or a heat map, depending on who you are. I think both are acceptable. But the point of this is for us to see the frequency and see if there's any commonalities there. And if we're looking at it a bit more, so it's fair to say that we have more frequency on Sunday up to 5 a.m., but we can see that kind of trend where, by Wednesday, there's still a little bit on those overnight hours, so to speak, or kind of like the 10 to 12 a.m. time period. But you can kind of see that there's some sort of like interesting shape as to what's happening throughout the week. And to jazz this up a little bit more, let's go ahead and drop like a white border on there. That might look nice. I don't know if I think it looks nice or if it's distracting. The other thing we can do is maybe just match the mark color to match the mark label to the color. That way the black isn't so prominent and they're more focused on that visual trend by the color that's happening. And then let's right click and let's hide that occur date. So now we've got a good story. And I'm hoping if you're reading this, we can say kind of definitively, look, there's high frequency Sundays and Saturdays during these times. I'm going to drag this back into our dashboard and let's just kind of start getting fun and interactive with it. I'm going to go ahead and drop the color legend here as well. I think I might make this a little bit wider just because there's so many points. This is just a little bit squished on my screen. I'm going to bump this up just another 100 pixels so we've got a little bit more space for everything on there. We've got something nice kind of going. I think at this point I've made a bad decision around my males and I'm going to go ahead and change them to like a different color because I don't want us to think that orange means more than it does. So let's go ahead and set them to green. Okay. So now we've got 3 visualizations. And as we round out the last 15 minutes, I want to kind of polish this up further and kind of focus on how we bring it all together a little bit further. So the first thing is, wouldn't it be nice if we could kind of drill in, so to speak, or focus in on some of these time periods and then see how the other elements respond. So in the aggregate, we know the distribution of victims, and in the aggregate, we know the times, but let's see if we can't filter and get a little bit more information. This is sort of that kind of exploratory angle to things. So if I click on a worksheet on a dashboard, you're going to see this funnel icon right here. I know that's tiny, but it says use as a filter. So I'm going to go ahead and click that so that it's white. Now I'm just going to click on, let's do Sunday, 1 a.m. And as I click and unclick, you'll notice a couple things happening. So first, the map is zooming in because we've got less data. It looks like a lot of the density is sort of changed. It seems that the Bronx and Brooklyn are still prominent, but a lot of what's happening in lower Manhattan's no longer there. And what's happening out here to the east, I guess closer to sort of Long Island, has gone away as well. And then we can see the distribution of the males and females, and particularly I was looking at the age groups change. So we've got the 18 to 24-year-olds become more prominent with males here, and then we can see the 18 to 24 are pretty prominent in females there. So it's fair to say that during this kind of 1 a.m. hour that the victim profile or distribution has changed. You can drag a box on these. So I can select 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. on Sunday. So now I've got that whole time chunk. So that early morning kind of section, and we can see what that looks like. You can also hold down your control key. So if I want to choose Sunday at 12 a.m. and Saturday at 12 a.m., and then let's just randomly pick something down here, Wednesday at 10 p.m., you can do that. That's that kind of ad hoc concept of now I can see really clearly and interactively work with those different things. And we can also make it work the other way. So if the question is more, okay, when are older females usually part of these incidences, let's now do the same thing. So I clicked on this worksheet. I clicked on the funnel icon. We're going to use it as a filter. So I'm going to click on this bar. This is now going to be females age 45 to 64. So now we can see a lot of difference. First of all, there wasn't a lot of data here to begin with, but we can see that that kind of highlight table has really changed. And maybe if we look at our 25 to 44-year-old males, that looks near identical in terms of a trend. Let's look at kind of our children and see what we have there. I'm going to do males and females. Still looks like it's happening around that time period, but there's a little bit more heat earlier in the afternoons than we saw before. I'm going to do maybe one or two more things to kind of clean this up. First, let's just bring this on as a filter, the borough. One thing I like to do in Tableau as well is if you right click on a field, you can click describe, and you'll be able to see a summary of the information on that field. So there's some interesting stuff up here, kind of boring, but useful. It says, what the longest number of characters the column is, which is 13. I'm guessing that's for Staten Island. But it says what it is. It says it's a discrete dimension. It says that it's a string. You can see that right here. It has what the name of it is in there. But more importantly, this is the section I like to focus on, which is the domain. So that means what are the different variables, or what are the different members, the different names, categories, boroughs in our case, that are in this data set. And there's 5, which is nice. This is very clean data because we've only got the 5 boroughs. They're all labeled the same. So let's bring borough onto our filter shelf, and let's go ahead and select all of these. So as I'm thinking through this, and we're kind of going further down the line of building the dashboard, we've done all these different things. It might be nice to be able to focus on one borough at a time and have just like a nice filter at the top that someone can go in and adjust them. I'm going to cancel this so I can show it to you again. So first you're going to drag on borough. That automatically brings this filter menu up. I tend to get in the habit of clicking this all button. That just means we're going to filter to basically everything or filter to nothing. So we're going to check all of those. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to show the filter so you can see what it looks like. So now we have this sort of multi-select checkbox that we can filter our data. So it's fair to say if I uncheck, there's no data there. I've selected none of the boroughs, but if we wanted to just see Manhattan, we could do that on this highlight table, or again, we can multi-select. We can specify the way this looks, and I think I might actually make it a single value dropdown. So this means they can only pick one borough at a time, or maybe them all together. And let's do the same thing that we did with that victim sex. And let's right click and let's apply it to all using the data source, so that when we put this filter on our dashboard, we can filter every single visualization to that. So let's pop back in here. I'm going to click save really quick. And now that we've built that filter off of this visualization, let's now click this down icon, which has a lot of options, but where I want you to focus right here is on filters. So once we apply a filter to a worksheet, we can then bring it into the dashboard. So we're going to go down to filters. We're going to click on borough. Now it's over here on the right, and it's still that multi-select. So let's go ahead and adjust this to that single value dropdown. If you miss that step, that's okay. No worries. It can be multi-select if you think that that's better. But just to see if it's working, let's go ahead and filter to Brooklyn. So I can tell it's working because of a few things, right? First, all the visualizations changed. And second, the map is clearly zoomed in on Brooklyn. And this is actually nice because we said in the beginning, look, there's a couple areas here that seem like they're problematic. One of them being the Bronx and one of them being Brooklyn. So it might be appropriate to kind of present this and to be able to do a deeper dive around the victims and when some of those incidences were taking place. Let's do one more thing, because this is kind of the silver lining of this whole data set, which is I'm going to just quickly build, and you can build this along with me. Let's right click drag our occur date to the column shelf, and let's go ahead and set that to month. Now this is green, so it's continuous. So I've got this sort of like unbroken amount of time. And let's put our number of incidences on the row shelf. So this is our same seasonality, but we've got that one long trend line of all of our data with these spikes throughout it. And it looks like clearly something happened in July 2020. And obviously things have kind of trended up since then. But this is where I want us to bring on that statistical murder flag. Again, I don't like the name of this, but let's bring it on to color, because what I want to do is I want to break this down into, was it a fatal or non-fatal shooting? So anytime it's true, it was fatal. Anytime it's false, it's non-fatal. And this is where it's really important to actually dig deep into the data. It would be very easy to say, yeah, you know, shootings, they tended to go down and then something happened and then we just have this crazy spike. But if we look more deeply in the data, it's the case that, you know, fatal shootings have tended to go down. There is a spike in July. It's not as dramatic as the spike as this one is. And I think all of us are probably guessing that that's July 2020. That's peak COVID time period. So a lot of Americans are probably letting off steam, shooting guns, who knows? But thank goodness these were non-fatal incidences during that time. But it's kind of important that we kind of separate that out and make that distinction. I think maybe we'll make this an area chart just to kind of jazz it up a bit. And the months, there's a lot of data. Maybe we'll keep it like that. That's probably okay. And let's adjust our colors a little bit. So if it's false, meaning non-fatal, and maybe we'll adjust the aliases here. You can also adjust the aliases by right-clicking on the color legend. So let's call this non-fatal. And let's call true fatal, just so that it's a little bit more clear. No one is ever going to be like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that true false flag. And then let's adjust the colors. So I'm going to make non-fatal like a light gray, I think, because, you know, they're not super important. And let's keep fatal as the orange for now. And then the other thing I want to do is I actually want to, oh no, maybe I want to keep it like this. You guys can kind of think on your own on this. If you want it to be stacked so that non-fatals at the top or fatals at the top, they tell different data stories, right? So this gives you that kind of total sense of what they are, with the fatal being there first. This, I think, gives a bigger impression that while there are some, you know, several incidences or a non-zero number, a big portion of them are non-fatal. So let's kind of call this trend of incidence outcome, monthly trend of incidence outcome. Well, let's just say shooting outcome. And I'm going to edit this, and let's just delete this month of occur date because it's kind of obvious that it's a month, but this is good still. And let's go back in and let's maybe just drop this right here on the left. So we have some sense. I think I've got a lot of colors going on here, but we're kind of starting to shape it up, and we don't have that much time left before we're going to kind of switch over to the breakout tables. So maybe to kind of wrap this up, let's add a title and let's clean up a little bit of the formatting. Now, I want to add the title. There's two ways to do this. There's this click this show dashboard title button. I never use that. I usually tend to make text box instead. So what I'm going to do is a couple things really quickly. First is, instead of tiled, which is basically what you saw where you can drag and drop and they stick into the canvas, I'm going to set this to floating mode. So you'll see when I float it, I can put it anywhere. This is like working in PowerPoint or something, or Photoshop, where you can layer on top. So just for this, I'm going to take a text box and let's call this something similar. So let's call this NYC shooting exploration dashboard, maybe. Let's make this a lot bigger, make it bold. And then I'm going to bring on what's called a container. So a container is just a way to put two elements on your dashboard in the same bigger box. I'm going to take my NYC shooting exploration dashboard title. I'm going to drag it around. I'm going to hold my shift key. When I hold my shift key, that you can see that blue box around that container. That's going to tell Tableau, put it inside of that box. And then I want to do the same thing with the burrow filter. So you're going to just click this. You're going to keep dragging. You don't have to hold your shift key here. You can. I don't think it'll change anything, but you're going to want to drag it until it's on that right side of that blue box. So my goal is that these two are next to each other. And then I'm just going to double click. When I double click on this single grabber bar, so that's for a single element, that's a single worksheet, that's just a filter. When I double click, I now have that whole container that I'm moving around. And then I'm just going to hold down my shift key one more time and put this at the top. That's obnoxiously large, but we've now fixed it to the top. And let me take this part off as well, so that we've got just like a dashboard title and we've got our borough. So now if I go to all, we're going to see, our trend change here. We're going to see our map change. Let's go down into Brooklyn. I'm still not a fan of the colors. I feel like I've gone a little bit too deep into orange. So we may want to clean this up a little bit further. Maybe we take I think I like this and this, but maybe we've just got this issue here. So I'm going to maybe adjust this. Instead of being orange, let's make it maybe like a darker gray instead, just so there's some visual attention there, but it's not overly dominant. And then I feel probably a little bit better with how some of this is coming together. And anything else I would kind of do here? I mean, we've got a pretty simple dashboard to begin with, but we've got a lot of elements to kind of play around with and to be able to visualize. And if you want to kind of fully see the whole thing, we could use our time as a filter. So if we really wanted to drill in, so I've done the same thing. I've clicked on our trend and I filtered to it. If we were to kind of drag a box, if I can get that to draw over those months, we can kind of filter in and see maybe where that's happening. That's Brooklyn. Let's go to all and see if we see maybe any changes. In particular, let's see where was all that noise happening in July of 2020 and when was it happening? So yeah, I mean, look, this is July 2020. Here we're more looking at the time of day. So it looks like people were probably firing off guns, late into the evening within that month. And I think I'm pretty close to time. Honestly, we'd probably want to do a little more cleanup in terms of grid lines and those types of things, but you've gotten a really high level overview of how you can build a dashboard in Tableau. Probably the last step would be to right click on your dashboard and hide all the sheets. That's just going to tuck all those sheets away so that we know which sheets are actually associated with the dashboard that you've just built. And we'll save one more time. Okay, Nathan.
No, it's looking great. And we've just got a question that's it can be quite a complex question, but when the data set size changes, how often do you have to rebuild your dashboard? I know in this use case, because of a lot of the charts it wouldn't actually change too much. Maybe the only one that would change would be when you've got more years. Say if this went for another 10 years, the top chart would become a bit squished.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say, and Nathan, you can speak to this as well. One of the great things about Tableau being a data reader is you just point it at a file. So or you point it at a database. So if there's new data that comes in, you won't have to remake these. As Nathan pointed out, we'll get more data over time. So probably the most problematic visualization here is the area chart that's just going to collect more data. In that case, what you might want to do, and what I would probably do, is ask the question of how many years in the past do we really want? And so what I might do is I might actually put a filter on our entire data set. We can use this relative date filter, and let's maybe limit it to the last 3 years. And maybe let's make it 5. That area chart's a little bit squished. And we'll do the same thing, apply it to all using this data source. But in general, with most of these charts, it could read in new data. So if they added on 2021 and then 2022, once Tableau reads it in, it's going to just continue on with that chart.
I think that was really good summary of how to use that feature as well, where you just obviously, like you say, Patrick, as you get more data in, you can just set the relative range to change. So that's a great use case for that example there. And then another question from Patrick: can you publish this dashboard to a web portal?
Yes, you can. So I'm logged into our server, but let me actually go to Tableau Public, and I'm going to save to Tableau Public. Give me just a second to log into it. But yeah, so Tableau Public and Tableau in general has sort of 2 aspects here. The first aspect is the building, but the second one is sharing, and that's the important component. And this is part of the application process, Patrick. So first, because I'm putting on Tableau Public, it's going to force me to make a data extract, which just means to attach my data to basically attach a copy of my data to the workbook. I'm just removing those data source filters so that we don't limit any of the data, because it's going to make like a snapshot or a local copy. Once I do that, and if I go back up to server, Tableau Public, save, I like to do save Tableau Public as, and then we'll try to give it like a good name. So see, it gave it the name of the workbook, but let's call it NYC shootings, and then I'm going to put Tableau training 216. Once I save this, it's now going to package these visualizations up, and they will be available on the web. So it's very common, Patrick, that you will be doing this as well, as you will publish it up and then you will have it on your Tableau Public, or if you're working with a client, it'll be on their own Tableau server, which is just kind of a private Tableau Public environment. And then anyone who's an end user, and this is how we will actually look at your application, your visualization that you send over, can interact with it in the same way that you kind of designed that experience.
Thank you, Patrick. And you can also embed dashboards into web browsers as well, Patrick, if you need to be that. So when we're doing charity work, for example, and people want to share publicly, a bit like this information that's happily to be shared on a public domain, you can embed a dashboard into a website, which then would either jump you to Tableau Public, there we go, or you can just interact with it in the web browser itself. What did I miss one then? Oh yeah, Eric's just asked, do you have a favorite font, Anne, that you like using?
Okay, Eric. So I know you like to ask a lot of questions. My favorite font to use when I'm building Tableau dashboards and visualizations is the Tableau family of fonts. There's a reason for that, which is it's designed for reading data, particularly numbers. And I think there's somewhere, I probably favorited it myself, where I have, oh, there it is, the font samples. I use that because it was designed, particularly when we have like streets and roads and maps, to be legible, and the same thing when the numbers get really small. I do like to use caps a lot for my titles. That's probably the only thing I do. But Eric, I tend to avoid, and Nathan, you can weigh in on this, custom fonts. There's only a limited amount of fonts that will come through on your Tableau dashboard. So a lot of times we'll see people put a lot of effort into finding like the perfect font, but it's not installed on my machine, so it doesn't look good. It'd be better if you went with the Tableau one. So I'd stick with Tableau, or maybe Georgia if you're doing like a very formal viz. I like that as well.
Yeah, it's fun to have a play around with those, but when you get into publishing dashboards to a server and you're using a custom font, you'll notice all sorts of problems with your sizing if you're using a lot of custom sizes as well throughout making a dashboard. So yeah, if you're not too, it can be done, but obviously it's quite difficult. And then when you're making changes to a dashboard, or those little things, if they're not custom fonts available on your server, for example, yeah, you'll run into problems with sizing on some people's devices. So yeah, it can't always be as easy as you want it for those type of things.
Yeah, stick with the Tableau family. I like Tableau Medium particularly because I have a heavy hand. I don't like Tableau. I don't like Tableau Book. That's the default. So you can customize for the regular, looks good, but I like Medium.
So you may have noticed I just shared a couple of slides and learning resources, a couple of links, sorry, in the chat. And these will just help you with any Tableau related issues. And also there's some great free trainings we offer from the Information Lab on Thursdays that you're more than welcome to sign up to. And as you see here, we mentioned a few of these other links during the session, and also some good blogs and books if you want to get involved, even one from Anne herself there. So just very briefly, obviously you've met Anne today, and if you haven't, you've probably already seen her around, but we also have Toby on the call today. He's going to be the head of the Data School New York. Luke, who will be the global head of, or who is the global head of recruitment, so you'll be dealing with him if you're applying to the Data School. And Andy, you'll be in and out here and everywhere with training videos if you haven't already bumped into him. So yeah, and you can see all the contactable emails at the bottom. So likewise, if you want to get in touch with them personally, or business wise, there's their email addresses. I think these next links also will be on the email, but these will just let you know for any other future events we run. Obviously, this was our training session. We also run a meet and greet event that's more to show you how both of the softwares are used at the most basic level. So we also use Alteryx at the Information Lab and in the Data School, and we'll take you through the Alteryx software and how we use that. Give a brief demo, and then we output that into Tableau, and that's when we get more of our consultants who are going through the training process and during their placement years, and they come on and show you how to do that and tell you a bit about their experience. So yes, we'll have a meet and greet event next Wednesday, and then you can find all the links to these and where to sign up on Eventbrite.